Hello, I'm James Henry, and this is The Message. The Message.
Well, good morning. I'm James Henry. I'm the pastor of St. James. I'm bringing the message this morning. I had to think for a minute about who I was and what I was doing, and those are the things that I am and are doing today. We're the third week into our series about visioning the church. What is the church meant to look like? What is it supposed to be about? Why do we do this weird thing every Sunday morning where we get together in a room, sing some songs, and hear some guy talk for a while? Or sometimes a gal, but mostly a guy, talk for a while. What's this all about? We've seen some interesting images in the Bible about what might be what this is all about. And today we come to the banquet. This is perhaps my favorite image, mostly because, as you can guess, just by looking at me, I'm very fond of food and sitting down to eat it. So consequently, the idea of eating good food at a banquet is a good thing. Let me set the scene for you in this particular passage that Linda read to us. The passage is set at the table of a Pharisee. They're eating food. They've been eating food together, and Jesus uses that time to kind of teach about what does it mean to eat food together. He's already talked about humility just before this passage we're reading right now. He's talked about humility. Don't sit too high up at the table and get yourself honored, because maybe the host is going to come in and say, dude, you're sitting way too high. Go sit at the bottom of the table. And then you're really embarrassed. So don't be embarrassed. Be humble. Sit at the bottom, and then you feel good when somebody says, hey, come on up to the front. It's not long after this that the very familiar, as passages go in the Bible, very familiar passages about losing things and finding them go. And we're going to be talking about some losing and finding things next week. But this week we have a banquet. We have sitting down together. We have the idea that somebody has sent an invitation. Come to my party. I'm having one. It's going to be great. Come on over and enjoy the food. And we're to assume everyone has kind of RSVP'd yes. Of course I'm coming. On the day of the actual party, after the invitation has gone out, we're sitting down for the party, only nobody has shown up yet. I don't know if you've ever been in one of those kind of parties where you show up on time or a little early and nobody else is there, and you're wondering, am I going to be the only person at the party? Because according to my children in college, they tell me that parties don't start until 3 hours after the time that's announced. So why do you announce a time 3 hours ahead of time? I guess because if you announce the time 3 hours later, people would come 3 hours later than that. So, I mean, my kids tell me, it may say that the party starts at 8, but we don't really show up until 11. When I was in college, if they announced the party was at 8, you showed up, 8:15, 8:20, not 11 o'clock. In any case, in this instance, invitations have gone out, people are invited, they can come to the meal, but nobody shows up. So the master sends out his servants and says, hey, go check on these people. Where are they? And, I'm sorry, I bought a house and I got to take care of it. Please excuse me. I'm sorry, I just bought 5 pair of oxen. I'm busy. I can't come. And the last one, I got married. I'm sorry, I'm not going to make it. Now, the truth of the matter is, we think these are all lousy excuses. The truth, in the Bible, those are great excuses. Those are great reasons not to come. It's not that they're lousy excuses to skip a party. You know what? In the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, if you got married, that was a reason to relieve you from service in the army. If you got married, you could be excused and didn't have to show up to fight on the front lines. That's what happens. So these are good. These are good reasons not to show up. Perfectly valid and legitimate excuses, which is great. Except that this is an important banquet. And that this banquet is so important, at least if I'm understanding this parable correctly, it's so important that even legitimate excuses ought to be carefully thought through, and people ought to show up. Now imagine with me, if you will, that the master has got all this food. It's all set out at the table. I remember I've been to lots of different banquets over time. Every year where my wife works at Lord and Community Action Center, they have a big gala and there's lots of food and lots of people come. I'm sure it would completely freak them out if they had a gala and no one showed up for the event. The food was all there and they couldn't go. I've been to weddings where everybody, you expect the guests to come and share in the meal afterwards. What do you do with all the food if nobody shows up? And usually there's food left over anyway. What do? Do you say, well, I want to celebrate my wedding so much, I'm going to go out on the street and just anybody passing by, I'm going to invite them in. But in this story, the master of this banquet says, yeah, I want everybody here. I want the banquet hall full. It doesn't matter to me whether I know the people already, whether I'm able to reciprocate them, whether they're the invited guests or not. I want the banquet hall full because it's not a party until the room is full. It's not a party until everybody who can come to the table, who feels like maybe they're not even worthy to come to the table, is here to share this meal because the food needs to be shared. This week I got the opportunity to read about all the background of this passage and what it might have meant, what it could mean for us. It could be historical. It could be that the prophets of the Hebrew Bible told people what they ought to believe. Jesus has come to tell them the time is now. They still haven't come, so they open up the banquet to people like Gentiles and sinners, people like us. The hoi polloi, everyone else. Welcome at the banquet. This also could be written at the same time. It could have been written for folks who after the church is established. Because once a church becomes established and you kind of get comfortable with who's there and who you like and who you want to hang out with, you get kind of out of place. I've been in churches in my lifetime where some chairs, we like to move the chairs around on you guys. We even like to move from one end of the hall to the other end. And the reason we do that, besides the fact the air conditioner doesn't work on the other end, is because we don't want you to start thinking that you own the chair you're sitting in. We don't want you to ever get to a place. I've been in churches. I served churches as a pastor where somebody thought they owned the pew. So a pew is one of those hard wooden chairs that you sit in that's not like these. And if a first-time visitor sat in that chair, it didn't matter if it was a first-time visitor or somebody they actually knew, they would come in and say, you're sitting in my seat. How does that make you feel? I bet you it makes you feel real welcome. Get up and go somewhere else. This story is not like that at all. This story is, hey, established or not, there is a place at the table for everybody. Jews, Gentiles, Greeks, religious people, irreligious people. For the longest time, now pride goeth before a fall, but I used to love to tell folks, my clergy friends, that at St. James we had people that came here who told me very clearly they were atheists. They told me very clearly that they were agnostic. I love that. I think it's a perfect statement about what this community is all about. Because people are looking long before they're looking for something to believe. They're looking for a place to belong, a sense of connection, a place to be, to discover who they are and discover other people and to make relationships. Because in the end, that's what the church is. It's a group of relationships. Imagine for me, if you will, that one of the images of heaven, of eternity, is everybody at a table. Everybody sitting down and having a banquet together. Imagine your favorite food. Imagine you love anchovy pizza. Guess what's served at the banquet? Anchovy pizza. I'm going to be sitting somewhere else. But you can enjoy your anchovy pizza. Imagine a banquet where your favorite foods are just all laid out in front of you. Only it's not just the people that you really like you're sitting next to. You're sitting to people you don't even know. And you like it. And you actually like it because this kingdom is thrown open wide. This banquet is for all. And that's the image God wants us to be drawn to for the church. We need to throw the doors wide open, and it doesn't matter how old or how young or how tall or how short or what you believe or don't believe. You are welcome in this place. There is a space at the table for you. When Linda and I were in seminary together, we took a class together. And it was like an introductory level course you had to take, and it was taught by Dean Meeks. And he wrote a book called The Economy of the Church, The Economy of Grace, or The Economy of God, or I think it was I've already forgotten it as best I can. But there was an image that he liked to talk about when he talked about the economy of grace. Because the word economy, when we think of all of the analysts and other kinds of things, the original word economy just comes from the way a household runs. You know, a small household of people, however many people in there, that's what an economy is. It's the way that things run in the house. And he talked about that in a true economy, you are always welcome at the table. Didn't matter what you did or who you were always welcome, and your name was always known. Somebody knew who you were. And that's what the banquet looks like. You're welcome, your name is known, you're invited, and everybody has got a space. Now, we live in a world where it seems to me that we spend an awful lot of time defining ourselves not by who we are, but by who we aren't. I'm not whatever political party it happens to be. I'm not Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, Communist, Socialist, Neo-Nazi Party. I'm not any of those. So I define myself not because I am something, but because I'm not something. I am Christian, but instead of defining myself as an unapologetic follower of Jesus, I tell you that I'm not a Muslim. I'm not a Jew. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Zoroastrian. I'm not a Confucian. I'm not an agnostic. I'm not an atheist. And I spend all my time defining myself by what I'm not instead of what I am. And what I am is welcome at the banquet. What you are is welcome at God's banquet. What everyone you will meet today on the street, people you like or don't like, people that you love or don't love, people that you just as soon cross the street and walk down the other side, those are the people that are welcome at God's banquet. The people who want to get into an argument with you about who God is or isn't, or if there even is one, or if it's even worth arguing about there is one. If I know there is one, does it really matter that the guy I meet on the street or the gal I meet on the street thinks there isn't one? We can have a conversation about it. I don't have to be mean about it. I'm certainly not going to convince them there's a God who is defined by love by arguing with them and telling them that they're idiots for not knowing it. That is never going to win the kingdom. God throws the doors wide open and says, everybody, come to the banquet. And by the way, just because you were invited first, don't take your spot at the table or your invitation for granted. Even if you have a great excuse. I got something better to do. I just got married. I got to watch out for my spouse. I just bought a house. I've got to move in today. Whatever it may be, even the best reasons are not good enough to not enter into the banquet and share the fullness of God's love for all of us in this room. But guess what? Not just all of us in this room, not just all of us on the stream. By the way, if you're on the stream and it's not too good this morning, if the sound's not quite what you would hope it would be, we apologize. We had technical difficulties. We got them fixed last night. Everything was perfect. We came in this morning. They stopped working. It's kind of the joy of living at the banquet table. It's, it's like the fork stopped working. We left the table last night. The forks, the knives, the spoons were all laid out. We came in for the banquet this morning. Someone had moved the fork. There's no fork. You're going to have to eat the steak with your hands or something like that. You can't cut it because the knife is dull. We lost the steak knives. I don't know how it all works, but it's complex. But the truth is, you all are welcome at the table. You are welcome at the table. All the people down the street are welcome at the table. I had a little conversation, actually, I guess it was Friday. Yes, I was on the phone on Friday. I didn't see, Kristen was in here a minute ago. Thank goodness she's not. She's the personnel in charge of me and who always gives me a hard time if I work on my day off. But I got a call about our very next door neighbors, the people who live right next to us on the parking lot. Tom, who I have known, Tom, who is the next door neighbor, Tom Dawson, 93 years old, just died. And he was not a churchy kind of person. So his son immediately began our conversation by saying, you know, my dad wasn't a churchy kind of person. And I said, okay, that's 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% of Americans right there. So, I mean, he fits right in. But we would love to, the funeral is at the funeral home on Thursday, this coming Thursday. But could we use your fellowship hall? How much would you charge us to use your fellowship hall on Thursday? And for a little reception afterwards. And I said, I'm sorry. I can't charge you anything to let you use the fellowship hall because you're our neighbor. And we want you to use the fellowship hall. We want you to celebrate your father's life together. We want you to get together with your friends and family in this space. And no, we can't charge you anything. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. But everybody's welcome in this room. Now it means that this week, for the last several weeks, I haven't moved any of the furniture around because I knew we were going to still be in here because the air conditioner's still not fixed in the far end of the hall. And so I didn't move it. It means this week I'm going to have to move the furniture. But you know what? I can't think of a better reason to move furniture than to make people welcome in this space, welcome in God's banquet space, welcome in a hall where they can share food together. I mean, think about it. Supposedly when I was growing up, the best kinds of dates were not movies because you didn't talk to anybody. You watched something, you drove there, you watched something, you could secretly in the dark hold hands, I guess. I was growing up at a different time. And then, you could drive someone home and maybe have a conversation on the way. Maybe it's a no-pressure date. That's a good reason to see a movie, I guess. There's no pressure. You don't have to worry that the other person's going to know anything about you by the end unless you scream uncontrollably at parts of the movie. They might think, oh, what a wimp, or whatever. Or you laugh uncontrollably, oh, what a great sense of humor, or what a terrible sense of humor. That wasn't even funny at all. So, but you don't know anything. The best kinds of dates I ever went on in my life, with maybe a few exceptions, were meals. Were meals where we sat across the table from each other and were able to talk and get to know each other. Now, Linda would tell you that maybe the worst date she ever went on with me was our first date that she didn't even realize was a date. And we went to a Mexican restaurant, a little dive over in Wheaton, Maryland. And she was sitting across the table from me, and I was trying to do the important thing. I was trying to be present in the moment and listen to everything she said. So from across the table, on our first date, I stared at her while I listened to her talk to me. At the end of the meal, and we went back to my apartment because we were also writing a paper about the ethics of third world debt. So we went back, and Kevin was there, my roommate, and we were working on that paper. And I said, honey, I said, Linda, why didn't you eat any dinner? She said, how can you eat when someone's watching you like a hawk the whole time? So it's amazing we're even married 24 years later that happened. So a first date can be really good if it's a meal and involves conversation, but just a heads up, don't stare at your dinner partner so intently that they don't even feel like they can put food in their mouth. She left behind some of the best enchiladas I've ever eaten in my life. She didn't even take a bite because she was like, this guy's watching my every chew, So the long and short is, it can work out even if it's bad. Meals are one of the best ways to get to know each other. That's why we do meals on a regular basis here. It's why we do cookouts and pancakes and other things, because sitting across the table from somebody is that kind of a connection. And God uses that image, the image of food, the image of a table, the image of sharing together a meal and conversation. I'm not talking about the kind of, I don't even have it in my pocket, the kind of meal where you're not really with the person, you're with your iPhone or your other smartphone. I'm talking about actually talking to the person you're sitting with, listening to the person you're sitting with, being present with that person. I always tell my children, listen, if you want to be with somebody else, get up and go. But if you're going to be here, you're going to put the phone down. You're going to put the phone down because we're going to be in the same room together. You're not going to be somewhere else. And sometimes it works. Be present at the table. The next time you sit down with somebody else to eat, enjoy that meal and think about how powerful, positive, uplifting, encouraging, open it feels to sit at the table with somebody else. And then think of a God who wants to invite everybody you know and everybody you don't know, strangers, enemies alike, all to one big table. Because that's the church. That's why we do this communion-y thing every week. Because we're all invited to that table. You don't have to come. You might have a good reason not to come. You feel like it might push you away from God. But you're all invited. And you're always invited. And not just you, but everybody else down the street. Whether they know it or not. And maybe they don't know it. And maybe it's because I never said to them, come on down. And maybe it's because you never said, come on down. We need to be better at being the banquet, the celebration, the adventure, where we throw open the doors just like God and say, come on down. This is for you. This is your place as much as it is ours. And you're all welcome to share this meal. No reasons to be excluded. So, know that you're always welcome and that the table is always ready for you.